that long.
Yeah, that season I was kind of like.
The same.
I'm gonna check on my
Exactly the same. Make sure.
Well, I know that's the thing is,
The main bonus of this whole deal.
yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Are we ready?
No, almost. We're ready.
I'd like to call the Building Advisory Board meeting of Tuesday, August 14th to order. First item of business is roll call. Starting on my right, state your name, please.
Ryan, he looked at me.
Starting. I'm sorry, I meant starting on the right end. Let me repeat. Let me rephrase that. Starting on the right end.
Ryan White.
Mike McCall.
Kevin Creel. Mark Frazier.
Dave Miller.
Mike Flory.
William McBride.
Scott Kraus.
Rick Walters.
Approval of the minutes of the May 8th, 2018 regular meeting.
I make a motion to approve.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Minutes are approved. New business. Staff.
All right. It was brought to my attention by a board member that wanted to have a discussion today about a potential code amendment request regarding the use of above ceiling space as a return air plenum. I think there may have been a little bit of confusion thinking that it was not legal in the 2012 edition of the IECC, and then maybe that it was again in the 2009. However, it was legal in both editions to be able to use a return air space as a return air plenum, provided the outside walls were insulated properly in order to make that happen. There was, like I said, there was some discussion on between myself and the other board member about wanting to maybe propose a change to that. So I was going to leave that up to you guys to discuss today, and if you want to, you can forward that your desire back to myself to do a staff report and a code amendment request so that we can further investigate and things like that. So I'll kind of leave it up to you guys to discuss that and see how you want to proceed. Do you want to leave it to be able to use, return air plenums, above ceiling as return air plenums, or not? You guys can discuss the pros and cons and kind of go from there.
I'd like to see it get amended so there is no return air plenum.
Okay. Does anybody else have an opinion on whether or not they should or shouldn't, or you'd have any reasons why you think it shouldn't be?
From a cost standpoint, and this was back 10 years ago or more when I was still designing, but it was always such a pain because if you had PVC pipe in the plenum, if you all kinds of things relating to fire in the plenum, then you had to buy a special pipe. Is it cheaper to go ahead and build the ductwork and not have to worry about all the fire retardant stuff in the plenum? I mean, what's the cost difference there?
Well, I think a guy's going to be better off because, for one, you can use any kind of piping in the ceiling, and for two, you're getting clean air back into your office space or whatever instead of sucking all the dust and everything else through there. I mean, if there's a return air plenum, a plumber has to run cast iron. It's kind of foolish to be running cast iron only because of that reason, because it's not, the pipe is not as good as using PVC. If you're using Schedule 40 and not using the, it's just as quiet.
Is there not a fire retardant plastic pipe that you can run now for sanitary?
PVC you cannot run in a plenum rated ceiling because it does not have the required smoke flame spread rating. However, you can wrap the pipe in an insulation that does. So you don't have to run cast, as it can be wrapped with an insulation that does have that rating.
Right,
But-
and we've done that in the past.
Right. So, but other than that, CPVC, no. PVC, no. And as far as if there is a special PVC that does have that, I'm not aware of it if there is.
I don't think there is.
So your options are either to run PVC and wrap it, or cast iron, or copper. Yeah.
Have you heard any pushback from contractors on going ahead and putting the ductwork in?
I haven't had any discussion with contractors at all about this. I mean, usually when we bring it up on a job site saying you have to wrap this pipe, most all the wire is ceiling plenum rated. There's not too many
You have
that,
to buy special wire.
Yeah,
Special
there's-
plenum rated
It has
wire.
to be
And
rated
Ethernet
wire.
cable,
But,
it costs twice as much for your plenum rated cable as it does standard cable.
right. I mean, right. I'm sorry, I
That's what
misspoke
I'm
there.
getting
But
at. By the time all the trades go through and that's allowed to be return air in that plenum,
Mm-hmm.
I'm having to insulate, electricians buying special wire. I mean, there's a lot of extra work that goes in, and if it was ducted, you're gonna get cleaner air, and I think you're gonna get a better system.
Yeah, and the biggest
And
issue is
Scott can
probably
probably
not
address
initially
that.
when it's brand new, but over the next period of next 10 years, how many people are going to install something that's not plenum rated in that ceiling?
Correct.
How many times have you been to a commercial project and saw Romex running across the drop ceiling?
yeah.
And I would have to,
That's the problem.
Well, the other issue, you also, I mean, the ducted is nice, granted, and what Mark was saying, but also you got to start, and from a design standpoint, when you're putting that together, is space requirements. Well, that's the reason a lot of the times we don't run the ducted return, because we're so tight on space, especially in existing buildings. You're trying to get supply and duct and return, along with the new plumbing and the new wires and the new fire sprinkler and the new, it doesn't always work that way. So I think there still needs to be options to allow the plenum rating to stay.
and on a new building, and it's the age-old argument with the architect, well, give me enough room, to run my mechanical.
Right.
But, I mean, there are situations where you got the beam running across there, and you got that much, you just don't have enough room to get the ductwork through. So you're kind of forced to go to the return air plenum. I would agree with Mark that the ducted return is the best system.
Well, and the problem
But-
being is if you're running storm drain, and that all has to be cast iron, then you're getting into big pipe and you have to insulate that. That big pipe has to go into those beams too. I mean, it's a catch-22, but I'm just thinking, down the road, and like Ryan's saying, later on, people go in there and install stuff that shouldn't be in there anyway.
And wouldn't you agree that the design could be made to allow for a duct to go through there, It would be expensive probably,
If it's not if it's not an option to use it as a plenum, then
Right,
something's
yeah.
got to be figured out.
Yeah, I mean, you'd have to figure out how it's going to work. I mean, that's it's just going to be additional cost on the mechanical side to do that. And
Well, on the
probably
structural
soffits
side
and,
too,
well,
probably.
could be structural, could be, design elements, because you're going to drop soffits now and here and there, and just depend on ceiling space. And I mean, there's a million things that can go into it.
So if you were to, want to move ahead to make a amendment to not allow that as a plenum space, would there be, exceptions? And if so, what might they be? I mean, if it's in it's in an existing building and it's pretty cost prohibitive to run ductwork and make that happen, then, what's the cutoff and what might the exception be, or is there any exception? I don't know what you guys want to, because there's a lot of cases where it can get pretty tricky.
I think on existing condition buildings, there's going to be over 50%, you're not going to be able to get return air duct through and supply a lot of times. There's just not space in the original design.
I would be happy to just see it in the new construction, and the old buildings could, stay the same.
Okay.
I'm just saying, it's kind of hard to go back and change what's in those old buildings. You can't go back if you do a project and reduct the whole thing.
Right.
But I would like to see it in new construction because I think it would make a difference.
And do you think, I don't know, Scott, do you think that, you know more than anybody up here, what's it cost to run return air duct? Do you think, is it?
It could double the duct job, really. As far as,
Yeah,
it's a whole nother trunk line. Plus, I think, why shouldn't the owner be able to decide whether or not they want a ducted return or a wild return of the building, rather than us just saying?
Yeah, I think that really kind of needs to be directed towards the engineer that's designing the system and what type of system, because there's many different systems out there that you could put together. We've got the new VRF systems that are going in a lot of these new buildings, rooftops. Each one's going to have its own different characteristics of how it works. So I think that really kind of still leads back to some arguments we had on other issues, back to the owner and to the engineer as far as energy code and requirements for that type of design. So
There's just a lot of trades that if that wasn't a return air plenum, the IT guys, everybody, it would help out because, it changes the cost for a bunch of contractors instead of just one.
Okay. But do you think that would reduce the total cost of the job, or would it be?
I don't know if it would reduce, but even if it came out to close to the same, you're getting a cleaner air. And you're not having anything up there, if there is a fire, that you take a chance on. You get a hot fire and it burns through that 50-50 insulation, then what? You're sucking all that PVC that's burning back into the building.
Okay.
It seems to me like it would pose a little greater risk of fire, too. If a fire started above that drop ceiling, well, if there's no air moving, it's a pretty still spot. It's got a potential to smolder itself out. If we got return air sucking through where that fire started, it's just going to fan the flames and spread that fire through that whole plenum space.
Well, your fire protection is supposed to shut that unit down.
If it
Supposed
works.
to.
If it works.
Right. But it's supposed to.
It's supposed to.
Okay. So, as a group, do you guys want me to proceed and go ahead with a staff report and have further discussion on this, or do you want to? I'm not sure what everyone thinks about it. Some of you for, and some of you maybe not so much. But
I would like
how do you
to
want to proceed?
I would like to see us proceed and get it all on the table and get the contractors notified that are going to deal with this, and the architects, and just get input from everybody. And we don't know whether the cost is way more to put in return air or about the same. And I do agree it's a better system to put into return air. But if it's cost prohibitive, or if it's way more expensive, then you take another look at it. So I would want to make a decision on the information that we have before us right now. I'd like to proceed and get more input from the people that deal with this.
I move that we proceed.
Okay. I don't know that necessarily needs a vote today. It was just kind of a discussion topic today to see if you want to do that. Now, what you need to do is fill out a code amendment request form and do the reasoning and background and cost and things like that, and get that submitted so that we can kind of have something to work with and start with, because we're not our department's not supposed to, initiate that stuff. It's supposed to come from a board member, and that's okay. You guys can do that. You guys have that ability to do that, but you still have to submit the form and get the ball rolling here so that we can.
So do we have a volunteer to fill out that form?
I guess I'll do it.
All right. Well, I'll look forward to that, and we can get that on the agenda for the next.
Can you just email that form to me?
Yeah, I think so. Don't we have yeah, we can get it to you. We have that form. I'm not sure if it's electronic or not, but if nothing else, I can scan it to you. So get that out so we can make that happen. There was one other thing. It's a kind of a discussion topic on new business that didn't make it on the agenda, but I wanted to see what you guys' thoughts were on it before we get too far ahead here. It's a little bit, it's not quite on this topic. It's something a little bit different. It's about contractor licensing. Recently, we've had a little bit of a loophole that we've kind of found in contractor licensing, and I'm not sure how many of you were on the board, or any of you were on at that time whenever we voted this in many years ago. However, there is an owner's exemption for obtaining permits and performing work on an owner's dwelling, where an owner occupant of a home doesn't have to be a licensed contractor in order to do said work. So if they own it and they live in there, or they own it and they plan on moving in once the house is built or the remodel is done, then a homeowner is allowed to do that. However, we've had a couple of folks recently that were doing that and never moving in and flipping it. And so right now the rule states that a person can only do this every 12 months. And so there's nothing in here that really prohibits them from pulling the permits, saying they're going to move in, and then not moving in or renting it. And as long as they do it every 12 months, they can keep doing that every 12 months.
What can we do to stop that? Because I don't think that should be happening.
No, I mean, I don't think so either. And I was just wondering if you guys had any thoughts to the matter about, and I can get you guys this information and stuff, and we can kind of, I was just kind of putting this out there kind of as a feeler for next week or next month as well.
I don't have a problem with somebody that lives in a house.
Right.
They own it. They're working on it.
And I think
They do it.
I think it's a good exemption to have.
Right.
It's just that some people are abusing it, and there's really not a lot of way for myself or my department to police that if they'd only do it once every 12 months. If they buy a house, flip it, sell it, that next January 1 or whatever it is from the last time they had one, they're doing it again. And it kind of, we've got a couple of folks who've used that loophole in order to do that.
But that's not a loophole. They're breaking the law, basically. But there's nothing you can do to enforce that, is what you're saying.
Right, because there's nothing in here that says that it says if they're the owner occupant or they plan on moving into it. Well, if they say they're going to move into it when they get the permit and they end up never doing it and they sell it, then there's nothing.
Well, bar them from getting another permit for 5 years.
Right.
Something.
Right.
Something to make it painful to them, to break that law.
Right.
That or hit them where it hurts in the wallet.
Well, that's true. I mean, I suppose something about maybe adding a penalty section, or if you don't move into it or
Well, that would
whatever.
be a penalty, not letting them get a permit.
And and some people can, they might redo the house, takes them 6 months. They might live in it for 6 months and then move on, which I guess technically is legal too. But that's not really who I was after, trying to stop doing that.
Well, you could change it and, put a longer time frame on the time that you have to live in the home.
Right.
Well, is there a time frame that you live in the home now? I don't think there's anything that says
No.
a particular, so you live there technically a day.
Right.
But I think one thing that you might want to consider is somehow a proof of occupancy, whether that's a bill that they've paid with that address. But that actually won't necessarily stop anyway. If you're wanting to, I think these guys have got it nailed down. Somehow it's got to be you can't get another permit or a period of time or something like that. That's probably the penalty that you're looking at. Because if they don't have a contractor's license right now, you're not prohibiting them from making a livelihood legally.
Right.
So that part isn't going to stop anything. It's just you won't issue them another permit unless they can prove that they've lived at that house. But sometimes things change too. You may be in the middle of it, and your wife gets pregnant, you have twins. All of a sudden, it's not big enough now as a home to live in.
Right.
Well, the biggest problem is, if a guy's in there doing all that work himself, is he skilled at every one of those trades that he's doing work on in the house?
Right, and potentially not. And that's kind of the hazard is if you're doing it for your own house and you're living there, I guess you can take that liability and responsibility. But if you're doing it for the sole purpose of renting it out to someone else, that's something different.
Or if you're flipping it and selling it, what are the people getting? What's behind the walls?
Right.
Right, and those things that are permitted are, I'm assuming, going to be inspected. So
Right, and the instances I'm talking about, they are getting their permits and they are being inspected. However, it's just they're not licensed contractor who's doing the work because they're saying it's their house and they're living there. So, I mean, there's the option of making it longer than 12 months, or there's ways that you can add in there other language that might prohibit that if you can't prove that you live there or something like that.
Can you come up with a language, or is that?
Yeah.
Okay. Then I would say go ahead and come up with the language to present to us.
Another option might be to require them, if they don't move in, to get their contractor's license.
that might be an impossibility, though.
Yeah, it might be.
They either have to go take the test, well, if they don't
You're right.
pass it, then,
And pay the money.
and pay the money, and then the other part is,
But
takes a while to go to school to get the other
before they could
option.
do another one, though,
Sure, sure.
they'd have to have that contractor's license based on the previous one.
All right. Well, that's the only other thing that I wanted to add in there, so we can move on down the list there if you want to.
Okay, moving on to unfinished or other business. Item 4.1, CSST amendment update.
You guys are probably already aware of this, but since we hadn't met in such a long time, I just wanted to give you an update that the City Commission did pass the ordinances for the amending of the UPC and the UMC for the CSST amendment that we talked about in April, I believe it was. So that's kind of over and done with. I just wanted to give you a heads up that the City Commission did agree with your recommendation and pass those amendments as far as CSST bonding goes. The item 4.2 is the Llama Public Portal. As you may or may not be aware, we have started a new software system here to track our permitting, licensing, planning items, as well as code enforcement, things like that. Anyway, there's going to be a public portal for you guys to be able to submit permit requests and things like that online. Don't have to call in the office anymore. You'll get your username and password and be able to submit for permits, whether it's standalone or a big commercial job online. We're working with our Davenport group is the company that created Llama for us. It's an acronym. It stands for Land Management, Llama. Anyway, we have a test group in mind. Some of you, I think, are on that test group, and we'll be sending you an email soon, probably within the next month-ish or so, to kind of be our guinea pigs or test bunnies for that public portal, and then we'll unveil it to the rest of the public soon after that, as soon as we get the couple of bugs worked out on it. but just going to want to give you a heads up that that was something new that was coming.
Okay. Item 5, public forum. Do we have anybody from the public that would wish to address the board? Seeing none, we'll move on to adjournment. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
A motion is adjourn.
Second?
All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Meeting is adjourned.